I am Marissa, 35 years old. For 11 years, my family never once cared about what I actually did for a living. They simply assumed I was their incompetent daughter struggling with an endless string of unstable jobs. I smiled and accepted their contempt, using it as a perfect shield to separate myself from their toxic expectations and bottomless greed. That quiet facade shattered the moment I pulled my beat-up sedan into the driveway of my grandmother's $2.5 million estate in Sedona, Arizona. The blistering desert heat hit my face the second I opened the car door. My father, James, and stepmother, Laura, were already waiting on the shaded patio. James sneered at my dusty tires. He stepped forward and shoved a heavy pair of pruning shears into my hands, ordering me to clear the dead brush behind the guest house. I nodded submissively, gripping the hot metal handles. My gaze drifted up to the second-floor windows. My grandmother Melinda's bedroom windows were bolted shut from the outside. Heavy metal brackets were drilled directly into the pristine wood frame. Then, Laura raised her hand to adjust her designer sunglasses. The harsh sun glinted off the platinum and diamond watch wrapped tightly around her wrist. It was Melinda's signature timepiece. The silent distress code was confirmed. I flashed them my usual clueless, pathetic smile. My useless daughter act remained perfectly in place, while my mind methodically mapped out the legal blueprint to completely annihilate them. The rusty pruning shears blistered my palms as I hacked at the dry Arizona sagebrush. Sweat stung my eyes, tracing lines of dust down my cheeks. I kept my head bowed, chopping rhythmically at the dead roots. That was the role I was assigned. For over a decade, James and Laura treated me like a stray dog they were forced to tolerate. While I baked in the 100-degree heat, my stepbrother Aaron lounged inside the air-conditioned living room. Aaron was their absolute golden boy, the self-proclaimed tech visionary. In reality, he was a 32-year-old parasite who hadn't worked a legitimate day in his life. James and Laura had spent the last 5 years quietly siphoning my grandmother's trust fund to bankroll Aaron's completely fake startup. They bought him a downtown luxury loft. They leased him a silver Porsche. They funded his endless networking trips to Vegas, all while tossing me their table scraps and relentlessly mocking my career. To them, I was just a failed real estate agent, a pathetic loser shuffling papers for pennies. 3 years ago, I stood in their pristine, marble-countered kitchen, practically begging James to stop taking money from Melinda's medical reserve. I handed him the printed bank statements. He swept them off the counter. He leaned back in his expensive leather chair, swirling his scotch, and laughed right in my face. He told me I was a jealous failure who would be fetching coffee and pulling weeds for the rest of my pathetic life. He laughed so hard the ice clinked sharply against his glass. He thought he was breaking me. He didn't know his arrogant laughter was the exact sound of his own impending financial doom. Every insult, every sneer, every stolen dollar was just another piece of concrete I was silently laying to build his prison cell. People always ask the same question when they hear stories like this. Why stay? Why put up with the relentless humiliation for 11 years instead of just walking away and cutting them off? They look at my silence and assume it was cowardice. They think a bowed head means a broken spine. They don't understand the invisible chain of the survivor. My weakness was never real. It was a highly calculated performance, a mental prison of my own design, built entirely to keep the front door open. If I had fought back, if I had shown even a fraction of my true teeth, James and Laura would have immediately trespassed me from the estate. They would have changed the locks, confiscated the phones, and completely isolated my grandmother, severing her only lifeline to the outside world. Playing the submissive, incompetent daughter wasn't a surrender. It was the ultimate tactical shield. It was the camouflage I wore to stay inside the enemy camp and protect the only person in this bloodline who actually loved me. I traded my daily dignity for geographical access. So, I swallowed my pride. I clipped the dead branches in the suffocating heat. I listened to Laura's shrill voice floating through the open patio doors, loudly bragging on the phone about a luxury European vacation they were booking for next month. I wiped the thick dirt from my hands and tossed the heavy shears into the grass. The yard work was officially over. I slipped through the side entrance, moving silently down the dark, air-conditioned hallway toward the locked bedroom at the far end. It was time to answer the distress signal. The heavy glass patio doors muffled the obnoxious laughter echoing from the pool. James and Laura were already celebrating. Ice clinked sharply in their crystal glasses. Laura's shrill voice drifted over the water, loudly bragging to Aaron about booking 2 first-class tickets to Rome. They were mentally spending my grandmother's money before she was even in the ground. I turned my back to the window and moved silently down the hallway. The air grew thick, stale, and unnaturally warm the closer I got to the master suite. The heavy oak door was padlocked from the outside. I pulled a small tension wrench from my pocket, sliding the metal into the lock. A heavy click echoed in the silence. I pushed the door open. The suffocating heat inside hit me like a physical blow. The air conditioning vents had been deliberately taped shut. The bolted windows trapped the brutal Arizona sun, turning the dark room into a literal oven. Melinda lay frail and motionless on top of the heavy quilt. Her pale face was drenched in sweat. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, jagged gasps. I rushed to the nightstand. The silver water pitcher was completely bone dry. I quickly scanned the messy tray of daily pill organizers. The orange prescription bottle for her daily heart medication was entirely missing. A chilling realization snapped into place, freezing the blood in my veins. They weren't just isolating her. They weren't just waiting for a natural decline. They were actively accelerating her death. Laura had confiscated the critical medication to artificially induce heart failure and weaken her mind. It was a perfectly timed physical collapse, engineered right before the notary was scheduled to arrive tomorrow morning for the estate deed transfer. It was calculated, premeditated medical sabotage. Melinda's eyes fluttered open. Raw terror flooded her expression. She reached out with a trembling hand, her thin fingers gripping my wrist with terrifying desperation. I clamped my hand over hers, squeezing her fingers with absolute authority. I leaned down, pressing my face close to her ear. "Just one more night," I whispered. "I am ending this." Her panicked grip loosened. A tiny, exhausted nod followed. I smoothed the damp hair away from her forehead, filled a glass of water from the bathroom sink, and forced her to drink. Then, I turned on my heel and walked out. I locked the heavy door exactly the way I found it. I stepped back out onto the sunlit patio, waving awkwardly at James. I plastered that pathetic, clueless smile across my face one last time. I climbed into my beat-up sedan and drove away. The second my tires hit the main highway, the terrified, submissive daughter vanished. The senior probate and trust agent took the wheel. The gloves were completely off. I pulled into a shaded lot, slammed the car into park, and ripped my laptop from the passenger seat. I bypassed the standard retail banking portals and logged directly into the state's secure fiduciary enforcement network. James and Laura thought I was an amateur shuffling paper forms. They had absolutely no idea I held top-tier administrative clearance for the county's probate division. I typed in the estate identification numbers. One keystroke. The emergency trust freeze engaged. A bright red confirmation bar flashed across my screen. Every single liquid asset, investment portfolio, and line of credit tied to the Sedona estate was instantly locked down by the banking authorities. The invisible legal guillotine dropped. Their financial oxygen was cut off. James slammed his platinum card onto the teller's marble counter. He barked his demand for a $500,000 wire transfer to Aaron's account, speaking to the teller like she was a peasant beneath his expensive loafers. He impatiently tapped his gold ring against the marble, expecting instant obedience. The teller typed rapidly, her eyes darting nervously to her screen. A harsh error chime echoed through the quiet lobby. The transaction was hard declined. The trust freeze was absolute. James sneered. He leaned against the glass partition, opening his mouth to hurl a string of vicious insults at the terrified bank manager. The heavy entrance doors slid open behind him. I walked straight across the polished tile. The county sheriff and two armed deputies marched exactly one step behind my right shoulder. James whipped around, his furious tirade dying in his throat. All the blood instantly drained from his face. His jaw went entirely slack. The arrogant patriarch dissolved into a terrified, trembling old man in a fraction of a second. The sheriff grabbed his wrist, twisting his arm roughly behind his back. The cold steel handcuffs clicked sharply into place, echoing off the high ceilings. Laura shrieked. She dropped to her knees right in the middle of the crowded lobby, her designer purse spilling onto the floor. She grabbed the hem of my blazer, her voice breaking as she hysterically begged for mercy. Dozens of locals stopped in their tracks, staring in stunned silence at the pathetic spectacle. I looked down at her tear-stained face. I slowly peeled her fingers off my jacket, stepping back to let the deputies drag them both out into the blazing morning sun. But one rat had slipped the trap. Aaron was nowhere to be found at the bank, and his luxury loft was completely empty. I knew exactly where he would go. Midnight blanketed my private residence. The silence shattered exactly at 2 a.m. Heavy boots violently kicked through the sliding glass patio door. Shards of safety glass exploded across my hardwood floor. Aaron stormed into the narrow hallway. His chest heaved with unrestrained rage. His fists were tightly clenched, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He screamed my name into the dark. He came to physically force the pathetic, weak sister into dropping the felony charges. He still thought he held the ultimate power. He truly believed terrorizing me in the dark would somehow fix his rapidly collapsing world. I stood perfectly still at the top of the staircase, looking down at his sweating face. I simply tapped one button on my illuminated phone screen. Thick steel security shutters slammed down over the broken patio door with a deafening crash. Heavy magnetic locks engaged on the front entrance. The smart home system instantly turned my hallway into a sealed, impenetrable vault. Aaron spun around. He lunged for the door handle, yanking it frantically. It wouldn't budge. Panic completely replaced his fury. He started pounding his fists against the solid steel. Flashing red and blue lights immediately flooded the front lawn. I had placed the local police dispatch on standby hours ago. The front doors swung open from the outside. 3 officers rushed the hallway and tackled my stepbrother straight to the floor. His fake tech bro bravado shattered into a million pieces. He sobbed uncontrollably, openly pleading for his mother as they dragged him out into the night. The heavy steel doors of the county detention center slammed shut, echoing down the concrete block. James and Laura were flatly denied bail. The federal judge reviewed the forged estate transfers, examined the medical reports detailing the intentionally withheld heart medication, and instantly revoked their freedom. They are currently facing a mountain of severe federal criminal charges, specifically felony elder abuse, criminal conspiracy, and aggravated financial fraud. They are staring directly down the barrel of a decade in state prison. Their meticulously crafted upper-class reputation vaporized overnight. The same wealthy neighbors Laura loudly bragged to about her luxury European vacation now actively refuse to associate with a family involved in a highly publicized elder exploitation scandal. James completely lost his arrogant swagger. Laura lost her shrill, demanding voice. They sit in cold, windowless cells, permanently stripped of the wealth and status they ruthlessly tried to steal. Aaron's reality check hit with crushing, irreversible force. The self-proclaimed tech visionary traded his tailored blazers for a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. He is sitting in a county holding cell facing felony breaking and entering charges, completely abandoned. The emergency trust freeze I initiated at the bank permanently severed his financial lifeline. Without my grandmother's money secretly funding his lifestyle, his fake empire collapsed in 72 hours. His silver Porsche was aggressively repossessed from the precinct parking lot. His luxury downtown loft went straight into default. He is currently drowning in massive personal debt, facing ruthless collection agencies completely alone. He cries uncontrollably to an overworked public defender, finally realizing his entire identity was nothing but a fragile illusion built on stolen cash. Back at the estate, the suffocating nightmare finally ended. We ripped the heavy metal bolts off the master bedroom windows and threw them straight into the dumpster. With her proper heart medication fully restored, Melinda's physical strength rapidly returned. The pale, terrified woman on the bed vanished. The color flushed back into her cheeks, and her vibrant, undeniable joy for life took over. Surrounded by professional, compassionate medical care and comprehensive smart home security protocols, she is finally enjoying absolute, unrestricted freedom. She never has to monitor anyone's toxic moods, endure psychological manipulation, or silently beg for basic necessities ever again. Yesterday morning, we sat together at the massive oak dining table. Melinda firmly gripped her favorite fountain pen and signed the finalized legal paperwork. She legally and permanently transferred full, irrevocable ownership of the $2.5 million Sedona estate directly to me. She completely erased James, Laura, and Aaron from her last will and testament, severing their legal ties to her bloodline forever. Late yesterday afternoon, I walked out onto the shaded back patio. Melinda was sitting peacefully in her wicker chair, a cold glass of sweet tea resting beside her. I sat down next to her in the quiet warmth of the late day. We watched the Arizona sun dip slowly behind the towering red rock canyons, setting the desert sky on fire with brilliant shades of violet and gold. A cool evening breeze swept across the patio. I took a long, deep breath. The air tasted incredibly clean. The silence in the house was no longer a weapon used to isolate us. It was pure, unshakable peace. We were officially free. The heavy wooden gavel came down in the federal courthouse 3 months later, echoing like a gunshot. After reviewing the forged transfers and horrifying medical reports of intentionally withheld heart medication, the jury delivered a merciless verdict. James and Laura were found guilty of felony elder abuse, criminal conspiracy, and aggravated financial fraud. James was sentenced to 9 years in state prison, denied parole for the first 7. Laura received an 8-year sentence. The court ordered $450,000 in direct restitution. They lost every single cent they ruthlessly tried to steal. Aaron didn't fare any better. The former Golden Boy wept at the defense table, pleading down to avoid maximum sentencing for the violent midnight ambush at my home. He received 4 years of heavily monitored probation and a permanent felony record. His fake tech startup dissolved in days, forcing him into total personal bankruptcy. The social fallout was devastating. The elite Sedona Country Club revoked James and Laura's memberships the morning after their arrest. Their wealthy neighbors completely ostracized them. Their meticulously constructed upper-class reputation was annihilated, replaced by permanent public disgrace. 6 months later, a wrinkled envelope arrived in my locked mailbox. The frantic handwriting belonged to James. The coarse pages were filled with desperate scribbles from his state correctional facility. He tried to weave the same pathetic guilt trips he had weaponized against me for 11 years, daring to write that as his daughter. I owed him forgiveness. A year ago, a letter like that would have sent my heart hammering against my ribs. This time, my pulse remained steady. I read his manipulative words, folded the paper, and pushed it straight into my heavy-duty shredder. The machine whirred loudly, turning his toxic manipulation into worthless confetti. I dropped the shreds in the trash and walked away. There was no lingering anger, no sorrow, only absolute, undisturbed silence. The suffocating energy that used to choke the Sedona estate is gone. We completely renovated the property, letting the brilliant Arizona sunlight flood every room. Melinda is healthier and happier at 82 than she has been in a decade. Last weekend, I hosted a massive dinner party on the back patio. The table was filled with trusted legal colleagues and true friends who treat us with unwavering respect. We drank cold wine and laughed until our ribs ached. Looking around that brightly lit table, I realized what a real family actually looks like. It is never built on obligation or fear. It is built entirely on mutual respect, fierce loyalty, and unconditional love. Looking back at the utter destruction of James, Laura, and Aaron, their pathetic collapse reveals a profound truth. For over a decade, they walked around this estate acting like untouchable gods, but their arrogance was nothing more than the power illusion of the empty wallet. They fundamentally confused having access to wealth with having actual personal value. Their entire identity and elite status were merely rented illusions, funded by my grandmother's stolen money. The exact second I initiated that trust freeze and severed their financial lifeline, their manufactured power evaporated. Take away the stolen credit cards, and they were instantly revealed as hollow, pathetic bullies. When the money vanished, their humanity proved completely bankrupt. Going through this brutal ordeal taught me 3 fundamental rules about survival: boundaries and self-respect. Rule number 1. A harmless facade is your sharpest weapon. Never interrupt a toxic relative when they are severely underestimating you. Their relentless contempt is the exact cover you need to quietly build an inescapable trap right under their noses. Rule number 2. Sharing blood does not mean sharing a future. Society pushes the dangerous narrative that you must forgive family members no matter what. That is a manipulative lie. When relatives cross the line into intentional abuse, the only correct response is the ruthless, permanent enforcement of legal boundaries. Rule number 3. True power is completely silent. You do not need to scream or throw emotional tantrums to win a war against manipulators. Cold rationality and undeniable, concrete evidence will always crush hysterical emotional manipulation. Have you ever had to hide your true strength just to survive your own toxic family? What was your final breaking point? Tell me your story in the comments below. Hit subscribe to join our community of survivors. Remember, true self-respect means refusing to tolerate abuse and showing absolutely zero mercy to those who intentionally exploit your kindness and trust. I am Marissa, and I am finally free.